We've all heard of the brawl to settle it all, but I guess we can refer to this one as the brawl that settles nothing. So the murdering child killer and sweetheart of white supremacists everywhere, none other than George Zimmerman, wants to compete in a celebrity boxing match for charity. There are conflicting reports, and people are talking about rappers being his opponent. People like The Game, which apparently is not true, and DMX, which CNN mentioned but is not confirmed. I'm even seeing people are trying to pass around a petition to stop this public freak show. As you can probably guess, my thoughts on the matter are different than most people. I'm not interested in seeing the fight or stopping it. Not because it's not significant, but because it doesn't matter. My reason for saying this has nothing to do with Trayvon Martin's death, ironically enough. Raising him from the dead is a non-issue at this point. The problem I have with this fiasco is that entertaining notions like this is what weak people do. George Zimmerman is a murderer of a child, and the best we can hope for is that yet another black man will put a physical beating on him the same way Trayvon did. Is there anyone who is pretending to themselves that this will somehow substitute as justice? George Zimmerman is a child killer. He doesn't deserve a few bruises. He deserves the electric chair. Since his acquittal, he has been a mad dog on the loose, threatening every person he can get close to. We no longer need to wonder if he is a vicious killer. The only thing we need to wonder about is when he will kill next, and why black people haven't dealt with this already. You don't give a child killer a public humiliation. You give them a public execution. But black people are a weak and cowardly lot. We are accustomed to living vicariously through entertainers, and that includes professional athletes. We cheer for anyone on television like a starstruck schoolgirl, but we don't hold any of them accountable for their lack of support of us. We just do what weak people do, and hope to see justice dispensed on TV, because we're too weak and feeble to do it ourselves. So what should we have done? You have your first so-called black president and first so-called black attorney general. Neither of them has done a thing about the child killer Zimmerman. And yet they get standing ovations from the slow-witted black masses who continue to heap accolades on men who demand that we support them, and yet they bring nothing home to us. Eric Holder should be a laughingstock in black society, and Barack Obama should be a downright pariah because he is now an accomplice in the tragedy that is Trayvon Martin. His Justice Department is daily locking up black men for dealing drugs, and yet has done nothing about a child killer of black children in Florida. And black people aren't demanding that he do anything either. And this is what weak people do. LeBron James has black people riveted to their seats for their games in Miami. He and Dwayne Wade can galvanize black people for their white team owners. But LeBron James and his team have shown more outrage at their teammates for making mistakes than they have with the prosecuting attorney in her office for deliberately losing the case against Zimmerman. When the state of Arizona passed a law against illegal aliens, the NBA team, the Phoenix Suns, made a public show of support for people who aren't even U.S. citizens and are in the United States illegally. And yet black men in the NBA have refused to make a public show of support for a black child who was murdered in cold blood where they live. Just a couple of impotent and half-hearted tweets on Twitter. Meanwhile, black people continue to buy their jerseys and go to their games. And this is what weak people do. Right now, people are passing around petitions to try to get this sideshow of a boxing fight stopped. All the while, they're totally oblivious that the people you need to be petitioning aren't the event promoters. It's the elected officials who are getting ready to demand your vote this year. Black people have several megachurches in Florida, and yet none of those clergy have come together to demand the politicians come and speak to their people, and demand the head of Angela Corey and her appointed prosecuting attorney. You're making demands of fight promoters that you have no control of, and making no demands of the preachers and politicians that you do have control of. You're just passing around meaningless and pointless internet petitions that will neither be seen nor acknowledged by anyone of consequence. And this is what weak people do. Now let's talk about what strong people do. Strong people get organized. Strong people cancel their NBA tickets and their cable TV subscriptions and take that money and pool it together to form a political action committee. Strong people get the 3 biggest churches in Miami, Sanford, and Orlando together and demand to see the mayor and the city council at your church and not at City Hall. Make it clear to them that you have the dollars and you have the votes, and that in 9 months you'll use both of them against any politician who does not rectify this wrong. You tell them that the biggest issue in the state of Florida isn't taxes, it isn't gun control, it isn't gay marriage, immigration reform, or Disney World. The biggest issue in this election should be the murder of Trayvon Martin and every other black male in the state of Florida killed by white supremacists on the police department or on the streets. And after you've declared what will happen, you then get together and you make good on your promises. This is what strong people do. What strong people do is they file a massive multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit against Zimmerman, and you win it. And after you do, you make sure that in 1 year, if Zimmerman has not paid it off, you take him back to court for refusing to comply with a court order. And then you see him put in jail for it. If mortgage and credit card companies can do it to people now, and if we lock up men for not paying child support, then we can do it to Zimmerman. And we can keep this up for the rest of his life if need be. And if he still wants to fight someone so bad, then you can put him in general population with a 7-foot-tall, 400-pound cellmate named Baby Kong, who's got 4 life sentences with multiple stints doing time in the hole, and Zimmerman can have all the fights he can handle. That is what strong people do. George Zimmerman is not simply an enemy of black society. He is an enemy of civilized man. The white public in general already sees this, but they do not see it as their responsibility to demand his punishment. That is your job, as black people, to sound the alarm and make it priority number 1. It's your job to make sure the public knows who your enemies are, both in office and on the streets. This is not a fight that white society is supposed to be doing for us. This is one you're supposed to be doing yourselves. So if you're a member of a church, you need to be talking to your pastor. And if he will not see you, then you leave that church and find one who will. If you have people you call your friends and they won't lift a finger on this, then you write them off. You've surrounded yourself with apathetic failures, and when it comes time for your child to be murdered in the streets by police or the next George Zimmerman, like what happened to Jordan Russell Davis, then just remember that you kept going to the basketball games, you kept your cable subscription, and you did sign that online petition to stop the Zimmerman fight. For all the good that did you. Because that's what weak people do.